2 of our pie dough. This is rolling it and shaping it. So I'm going to leave half of it. We're actually going to do a lattice top today. So the straight top pie is pretty straightforward and simple. We're going to do a lattice top. Since we're heading into the holidays, the lattice top will look very nice for a little Thanksgiving pie. So when you're working with pie dough, tart dough, any doughs like that, you want to make sure your table's floured, every contact surface is floured. So that even includes our rolling pin. I tell people if it's not overmixed and you can see the fat in there, it's really hard to put too much flour down. It'll only take in the flour it needs. So when I start rolling, I will do a cross and then an X. So a cross and an X, and you want to try to keep that round shape as much as possible. A lot of times if we're doing a decent amount of pie dough, we'll measure it out per pan. So general rule of thumb is 1 ounce per inch. So since we have 9 inch pans here, we should do 9 ounces of dough. I have a little extra just for the sake of, like I said, I've had all my dough together. So you're going to roll it down to pretty much a 1/4 inch. What I like to say is a general rule of thumb, if you're working on these metal tables, you'll almost start to see the metal of the table through your dough. So a lot of people, when they're doing their pies for the first few times, they'll measure their pan like this and cut right at the pan, but you have to remember to take into consideration that you have this part. So you want to go wider than what the actual pan is. And worst comes to worst, you're just cutting it off. With this dough, you can reuse it once. After that, it'll start to get tough. So I'm starting to see the gray of the table in there. My dough is big enough, so like I said, I'm going to go wider than I need to. If you end up not having enough, you can always do a little patchwork, but we like to get that one solid piece in the beginning. Important, use your release spray. That way when you cut your pie, it'll come out. So I was taught a long time ago, if your dough starts to stick to the table, you can kind of pick it up with your scraper. But somebody taught me, if you fold it into 4s like this, and then you take that one corner and put it right into the middle of the pan, when you unfold it, it won't break. So I have enough dough to cover it. Sometimes you may have to move your dough over, so I'm going to move mine over a little bit. So what you're going to do, you're going to lift and push. You want to make sure your dough goes all the way down to the bottom. So this is another mistake area. People will just cut the dough, and then when they try to push it in, it shrinks down and it's not covering up. So I go around a few times just to make sure my dough is covering all the way in, and like I said, so it's no gap going down. So even if there's a little air gap when you cut it, your dough will shrink. If your dough is properly made, and like I said, I can still see some of the fat in there, it'll shrink less. And then what you're going to do, hold this on an angle. You're going to cut into the pan, because it won't cut through the metal, but it'll cut your dough. So almost like a sawing motion, up and down. And that's our bottom. So with our lattice top, I'm going to leave this to sit here in a minute. I'll retrim that quickly. So I'm going to use my new dough first. Again, flour bottom, flour our top. So this, we want to keep it a rectangular shape. Since we're doing lattice, you may say, what's lattice? It's them old looking fences that are the intertwined wood. So you want to make sure you have the length where most of your pieces will be as wide as the pan. Some of them don't need to be that big, but if you keep it as a general rule of thumb of trying to keep them all the same size of your pan, you end up pretty good. So keeping that nice, even, same thing, 1/4 inch, you want it the same thickness. And one other thing I'm going to introduce today is egg wash. Egg wash, there's several different ways people will do it. Some people like to use more yolk, some people like to add a little bit more water. Since we had a lot of yolks around, mine is 2 yolks, 2 whole eggs, and a little bit of water. So, what I tell people in the beginning when they're learning how to do this, try to be as straight as possible. So I'm going to cut my pieces, and then I'm going to fill my pie, egg wash it, and we're going to put it in the oven. So once I get one piece, here's another trick that's very good. If you're doing, I like to do 3/4 inch pieces. They're not too big, they're not too small. Then once I have my first piece, I just keep lining them up. So again, think of the straightest you can get your cut for this, the better your presentation's going to look. And there's 2 ways to do your lattice. You could do 90 degrees, so your lattice are going like this, or you can do a 45 degree. I like to do the 45 degree. I think it just gives it that little extra pop. And if you cut strips of paper and tie them to a table, you can practice doing your lattices. We used to do that in past years, and I realized if you didn't tape it to the table, the paper is a little different than the dough. It would just slide all over. So we'd tape one side to the table, and then we would practice doing lattices. So you can practice this at home with paper. So you want to have, I have what, 6? You want to have at least 8. Like I said, matching your edges up right here. I'm going to cut 9 just to be on the safe side. And your smaller, all these are pretty big size pieces. If you had smaller ones, you could use them as your starting point, because you will see some of the sizes will vary. So I got my lattice. I'm going to give myself a little room over here. Put tape down so my bottom of my pan don't get all messed up. So, like I said, with this, I usually go around one last time and just get that extra trim on there. Sometimes you can see that it'll cut off a little bit more. Just gives you that look of your shell looks real nice. So I got my spoon. When you're filling, you want to come up to the edge on the sides and go a little higher in the middle, because the middle will cook down a little. So a lot of times I'll see people, it's flat across the whole thing, and then when their pie cooks, the middle looks like it's sunken down a little. So if you go a little higher in the middle, we call it mounding up. And these are pretty big apples for this one. Sometimes I would have people that would actually take the filling, take a knife to it and cut the pieces up. If you were doing smaller stuff like a mini pie or a tart, you might want to do that, but we should be good for today. So like I said, coming to the edge, try not to get it on the edge. So what we're going to do, think of, if you had 3-inch pieces, right? Think from your edge, you want to have a 3-inch space. Think of a flag. So we got a 3-inch space, or 3/4 of an inch. So when you're looking at it from the top, like I said, it would kind of look like the stripes of flags that had more stripes to them, like, you know, the U.S. flag. So if you look at it, it's kind of even. Sometimes people have real small gaps of where you can see the filling, and, you know, an inch piece of the pie. It just doesn't look as good. So here's the basis of your lattice. Pull every other one down. So I'll kind of push them in. I will pick them up at the end and egg wash them. So like I said, I like to do the 45 degree. So you're going to pull them down. Same thing, you're going to leave that 3/4 inch gap, but this is going to be on an angle. And then the easiest way I remember, so I don't mess up, because that's, you know, people all of a sudden pull the wrong ones. And again, I'll try to put them back as straight as I can. So once I move them down, I pull the opposite ones. And then the same thing, leave that 3/4 inch gap. These ones come up. And I'll try to hold on to one just so I remember I got to pull the other ones. but after doing this for a while, it's kind of second nature almost. Same thing, flip this one up, and see, I said eight strands would have probably been enough. I did that one extra one. Sometimes they break, and then you take this. This is where it becomes a little hard. So when you're doing these, you want to be really gentle cutting it, just so they don't shift around. So I'll even kind of go around my pie in the beginning, so the more I get cut, I don't have pie, strands of pie all over. So I'll try to trim as much before I actually spin my pie. And the same thing, you want to get that on that angle, get it right into your metal. And then since I don't have a lot left, now I can start trimming all these other ones. And this you want to be really gentle with. As you saw when I did the bottom shell, I was kind of really cutting. This you want to just lightly hold on to them and lightly cut through. And then if some of them aren't as straight as you want them, you can make adjustments. That's your lattice top pie. I have my egg wash already. So when you're egg washing a lattice top pie, you want to just really get on the dough itself and not on any of the filling. So it takes a little longer than a solid top pie, but again, we always want to have everything looking nice and professional. And then, like I said, I'll egg wash under each strand. That way, that'll just hold the strands in there when they're baking. Sometimes, if you don't do that while you're baking, the strands start to come undone, and then your pie doesn't look as good. So, egg washing this will take a few minutes. That's okay. I've got time. Looks nice, beautiful. And then as you're baking it, if you see spots that maybe don't look like they were egg washed as much, or you realize you missed a spot, you can always go back through and just touch it up as you're baking it. But it's kind of important to try to get them all on there in the beginning. That way your pie cooks nice and evenly. We'll cook these on 375. When your dough, the filling starts to bubble up through the holes, then you know your pie is done. And that's our lattice top pie.